Hello. Good morning from California. Hi,
And good
Kristen.
afternoon from Vermont. Yeah.
Oh, you're in Vermont. I didn't know that. Cool. Um, yeah, so welcome to the Nancy Chu live stream. And on my channel, we typically talk a lot about leadership, about passion. Sometimes we talk about spirituality. Sometimes we talk about solopreneurship as well. So today I'm so happy to have Kirsten join us. She is a business and life redesign coach, and I can't wait to dig deeper on what that means. Kristen also used to be a litigation attorney and psychotherapist. So, Kristen, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks. Yeah, people always get curious about that lawyer turned psychotherapist, and I'll give a little background. I was a litigation attorney for 14 years at both big law firms and then smaller law firm in Vermont. And when my children were born, each of them decided to almost try to die on me. And so the
Oh
good
my
news
gosh.
is they survived and are in their 20s now. But it was a really hard time when they were little. And so I kind of went through a little existential crisis, right? What's the point of the world? 9/11 had just happened right before I had my son. He was a premature baby, you know. And so when I came down and did a little discernment process about what I thought was important, the next step was to leave my law practice, even though I had made partner, and to go back to school and get a master's in clinical psychology, and then spent the next decade plus running my private psychotherapy practice, which is also where I got into positive psychology, which I love, and it's part of the coaching work I do now with my clients, as I use the tools of the science of how we thrive is how I define positive psychology, which we have a nice research base now of all the things that make humans better. So the coaching work and running my business was kind of a natural extension from all of my life transitions, because what I help do is help people who know they're not doing exactly what lights them up anymore, how to figure out what else they can do that still uses their strengths and all of the kind of wisdom they've acquired in their experience so far, but change it up and move the pieces around and head in a different direction that makes them happier.
Oh my gosh. I love everything you said. And also, I cannot imagine transitioning that many times in your career and also just going through education system and then get to the next thing because just becoming an attorney itself takes a long time. And then you became partner and then you went back to school and then you became a psychotherapist and you did that for, did you say a decade?
Over a decade,
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh.
in different ways, yeah.
And what is it about thriving? Because I love that you use the word thriving to describe what makes people happy. What do you think holds people back from that? Why are people not as happy as we can be?
Well, and of course, not everyone is unhappy. But what we've learned, it's very complicated, right? There's several different pillars of things that helps human thrive, and the obvious ones are things like relationships, right? Relationships matter, connection to other humans matter. But there's other things like our thought patterns and making sure that they're useful. There's also uh, how engaged we are with what we're doing, and that gets tricky because as you get better and better at what you do, you'd think that that would make it easier and easier, which it does. But that we find that the flow state, that state of where you're in that place where you're doing your thing and it's going really well, like, either performing musically, which I think you've done in the past, and I'm
Yes.
an athlete, so I've found it in my athletics. But the flow state comes when your degree of mastery and your degree of challenge are high enough that you come into
Mm.
the flow state. So think about your job, and you get better and better at your job. There's less and less opportunities for the flow state if your challenge level isn't increasing with your mastery level.
Mm,
So it just gets tricky that way. But so you have to be engaged, and then you have to have a sense of meaning and purpose. And that's a lot of the work I do is how do
mm,
we re-engage with people, and what is your purpose? And your purpose can change over time. A lot of people who have families, their main purpose is raising their kids for a while, and
mhm.
and then that ends, believe it or not. And then you have this open space where there's a next chapter or next level. Jobs change, priorities change. So, what's your purpose in this stage of life, and what impact do you want to make? So you look at all of those things, and also include a little sense of achievement, which is also something they found that people need. And if you put together all of those pillars and make sure you're reasonably healthy, you're going to have a lot better chance of thriving.
Yes, and what about people who are in the corporate world? Uh, there's people in my audience who work in big tech companies where I used to work. In those environments, things get hard, things get stressful. It's very competitive, and we are when you're in that environment, you can't help but want to compete.
Hmm.
That's how I was, and I kept on trying to get to the next goal. I kept on trying to get better performance reviews, and there was always the next thing, and it was never ending. And at some point, I had my spiritual awakening, and it was like, I don't think this is how life should be.
Hmm.
Um, so for people in those environments, always seeking for the next thing, thinking that that's what success means, what can you tell them about what life actually can be like?
Right. Well, I think that what we titled this burnout, right? And so kind of one of the whole frame around burnout is when you lose track of your kind of your compass, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that when you get into the higher paying corporate jobs, and I know I worked for a big law firm in Boston for
Yes.
a number of years, where hard work is the ethos, long hours, that for some time of your life, that may actually be the perfect place, right? You're doing your thing, you don't have other responsibilities, and it lights you up. So, but the real question is when you're only getting your sense of self-worth from your job review, and if you're only getting your sense of self-worth from whether your superiors find your performance good,
That's
um,
me. What that was me.
then you're really walking on a very thin tightrope of how you're getting your sense of worth and meaning in your life. So, a lot of the work I do with the corporate types is looking at life really holistically and taking that step back and trying to really figure out, well, what are my values? What is important to me besides making sure I have enough money to live the life I want, which is
Mhm.
always important. Safety first. We want to be able to eat and pay our
Yep.
rent and have a place to live. And then beyond that, you know, we do things like do the reverse. I don't say write your obituary. I say write your life, ceremony of life after your death, right? Like, what do you want to have accomplished, and what do you want to have people say about you when you die? Is one way that you can start to look at your big picture and just say, am I on the trajectory to hit those goals?
Mhm.
If I don't have any friends because I'm getting up early and going into work, and I'm working till 11 o'clock every night, and I'm going home, and I don't have a partner, and I don't have a family, or if I do have a partner that I never see, or and I do have kids that I never get to put to bed, right? Those are the kind of questions you get to ask yourself. Well, what is important to me? And is this what I want for myself? Or
Right.
is there another way I can get these senses of accomplishment and achievement and self worth in other ways that are not jumping through the hoops presented to me in this company I'm working for?
Yes, I love that. And that takes me to our first question of this live stream, which is when we feel burned out, what strategies can we use to recover and prevent it from happening again?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the best things to talk about to start with is, like, how do you even know you're burned out? Because I think most
Mhm.
people, when you're in it already, you're not thinking clearly at that
Right.
point. So, the first thing is to recognize what burnout even is. And so, if we're familiar with the term generally, but really a burnout is an actual I think it's like the World Health Organization has classified it as a disease, which is interesting. It's not a mental health disorder,
Oh.
but it's something that affects people globally. So the things to look for are, exhaustion or depletion of your energy level. So if you have,
Mhm.
low energy on a regular basis over time,
Yeah.
that is a warning signal that you might be getting burned out. And if you think it's just like you haven't slept, or you're whatever excuse you might be making for it, it could be the first red flag. Oh, I'm constantly have low energy. And then if you have low energy and you find yourself increasingly like disconnected kind of mentally from your job, so that
Mhm.
you don't really care, you're just phoning it in or going through the motions, and you've kind of stopped caring. Um, some you know we, we have that quiet quitting thing that started, but the question is, what's motivating that?
Yeah.
And so one sign of potential burnout is if you're just like not really caring about your job as much, even though you do care what people think of you,
Right.
if that makes sense. And then, especially if you start getting really negative, or that cynicism creeps in over everything that you are supposed to be doing at your job, that can be, another sign. Or if you're grumpy or frustrated or irritable all the time.
What about feeling scared all the time or feeling not enough, which is related to what you were talking about earlier, self-worth?
Hmm.
Does that count as burnout?
Well, so that would be the part of the road to burnout, right? Because your nervous
Mm.
system feeling scared all the time cannot maintain that level of high frequency vibration.
Yeah.
Your cortisol, your adrenaline, everything's going to get depleted, if it's every day being, nervous or scared or terrified,
Yeah.
that you're not, get that whatever the next promotion is or the right review. So all of those things are when you get worn down.
Mm.
And then that's real burnout. You've gotten yourself in a very depleted position, and something that's a hole that's deep and hard to crawl out of. So the
Yeah.
first thing we want to do is make sure we identify those warning signs early enough that
Mm.
we only maybe stumble into a little pothole instead of sinking into a deep well of burnout, because that
Yeah.
can really be debilitating, both mentally and physically, if you really keep pushing even though you're tired and depleted. Um,
So if we're already in that state, how do we recover from it?
right. Well, there's lots of different ways you can start. One is, acknowledge this is not a place I want to stay, right?
Right.
Um, Meaning in burnout. And then you get to start to, I call it, like, pull the threads out of why. Why am I
Mhm.
burned out? And so, um, sometimes what happens is, the metaphor of the frog that boils to death. When you place it in cold water and you turn the heat up, it and gradually heat it up, it doesn't understand it's getting hot, and so it stays in and dies.
Oh.
Whereas if you dropped a frog into hot water, it would jump out immediately.
Oh.
And so this can be any of us in corporate, right? It can be us, like, we didn't realize how bad it was. And I was like, just the water got hotter and hotter till we all of a sudden
Yes.
were boiling to death. Instead of, if we were healthy, we would have jumped right out.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah.
That just that's mind-blowing because I was that frog.
You were
And
that
for a
frog.
very long time, I didn't think that it was not normal. And
Mhm.
the whole time I was just thinking, I'm not good enough. As in, if I'm actually as good as I think I am, then I wouldn't be feeling this way. That
Right.
I would be able to have a good performance review with ease. And the
Mhm.
fact that I am struggling to get good reviews must mean that I'm just not good enough. And that became this very normal story that I was telling myself all the time. And so I was that frog
You
that
were the
was
frog.
boiling
You were
to
the
death.
frog. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you finally jumped out of that hot water, because you're doing well today. Um, but I do think, to be fair, sometimes the thing turning up the heat, is the system, right?
Yes.
It can be either the corporate structure, and I'll call out sexism because
Mhm.
sometimes it exists.
Mhm.
I'll call out racism
Yep.
because sometimes it exists. And there's other isms, all that can factor in. So when you are the, if you're trying to be the round peg in the square hole, or vice versa, you might not understand why it feels so hard. And it just simply may be that the environment that they've created for you to succeed in isn't one that matches well with you and your personality and your strengths,
Yes.
um, or your constitution. Um, and it's not a fault. It just is, oh, this road I thought was a paved road, and instead
Yes.
it's cobblestone, and I
Yeah.
have high heels on, and it's really hard to walk in high heels on
Yes.
cobblestone, right? But it's not because you don't have inherent worth and value, that that you are using. It's
Yes.
just sometimes the system itself is stacked against certain classes and types of people.
There are
Um,
people who say, "Oh, you're just not cut out for it."
mhm,
And that is a very common saying in my world, and
mhm,
that makes people feel like, "Yeah, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm just not good enough." And so there's this constant need to proving to yourself is probably the biggest thing that, um, my network and my people are going through. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this.
mhm.
I want to ask you a question about mindset
Oh,
because I feel like that is the foundation to how we perceive what
mhm.
reality should be. So my question is, what habits or mindset shifts are crucial in helping us achieve success without sacrifice well-being?
Yeah. Well, there's several. So we can start with self-knowledge.
Mm,
And also I'll say that one of the most important things you can do for yourself is to know yourself. But when do you take that time, right? In your busy life, to be like, oh, I'm now going to reflect on myself. But so a lot of the time, the reparative work I do when people are sure they're done boiling in the pot and they want
mhm,
to jump out is to remind them who they are. And so taking that inventory of what are my strengths. We do character strengths assessments.
mm,
What are my skills that I've learned over all my time on this particular job? Because I know how to program in blah blah blah, or I don't know your industry as well as mine, but how do I shape up, quantify all my skills in a way that they can cross barriers and,
right,
cross into other fields even.
right,
For example, when I was a lawyer, I had a nickname of counselor that one of my my ice hockey coach at the time called me.
mm,
And when I changed careers into being a psychotherapist, he's like, well, what am I going to call you? And I'm like, counselor, it's
yeah,
also counseling. So, the skill sets of listening and giving wise advice are the same as,
mhm,
from a lawyer to a therapist. You're just using a different venue. So knowing your strengths and seeing how they might be translatable to another field or another place or another job, just knowing what they are gives you power. So
mhm,
taking that time to inventory yourself, knowing your sense of mission and purpose at this point in your life, and making sure you can clearly articulate it is another thing. Now, if you sat down and you could clearly articulate, well, I think that my purpose in life is to da da da, then
mhm,
you can match that up against what you are doing and see where the gaps are.
right,
It may be that you're never going to be able to achieve what you thought your sense of purpose is if you stay in that role. Or there may be ways you can tweak and craft your job so that you can actually meet, get closer to that sense of purpose staying in your job. You don't always have to quit. um, but that they call that job crafting, is now this term that people use to
oh,
when they have
say
any
say
info.
more about that job crafting.
Well, so the idea is when you're in a situation where you may have some influence over your job,
Mm,
to figure out how you might be able to move and shift within your role to maximize your senses of accomplishment, worth, achievement, and also, um, feel like you're being appreciated. I always think appreciation is so high. Like, how
yeah,
can you feel more appreciated?
mhm,
And so there's ways to tweak things without just throwing out the whole, talking about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Just, you don't have to get rid of the whole thing sometimes. Sometimes you can just move a few pieces around here and there, and you'll be happier.
how do we How do we know how to do that?
To move the pieces around or to be happier? Both,
I
I think,
guess
yeah.
to move the pieces around so that we could be happier.
Yeah. Well, so the journey I usually take my clients on is start with knowing yourself, which we
Mhm.
started about, and then envision the perfect future, right? Like, what would be the ideal work day for you? How
Yeah.
many hours do you want that to be? What time do you want off? When do you want to have vacations, if any? How much money do you need to make? And really like see what the kind of goal dream job would be like, and then reverse engineer, well, how do I make that for myself, or find that out there, or bargain for it, or negotiate for it,
Yeah.
or just start to begin to do pieces of it at a time. But sometimes, and I don't know if you were one of these people, but sometimes when you're so far into your job and doing all the things and meeting all the goals and jumping through the hoops, you
Mhm.
forget about yourself. I
Yes.
mean, does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And you forget that you're a person, and you
Yes.
forget that you're not a machine, and you forget that people need people in their lives. People need quiet time. People need socializing time. People need leisure time. People need time for errands. You still have to go to get, at least order the groceries online, if not get to the
Yeah.
store. So kind of really being realistic about the pieces of your life that you have and want to accomplish, and
Mhm.
then being very realistic, like what does that mean if I were to be really honest and true to myself,
Yeah.
and what I think would be sustainable for myself, what could that look like, and then how can I start at least stepping my way there, if not just turning over everything and starting fresh.
Right. So it all starts from self-awareness and self-knowledge. What if we don't know?
Well, that's what I do for my work. I work with a lot of
Okay.
people that don't know, right? I have a process that I lead people through, but frankly, absent working with me, there's
Mhm.
plenty of books out there that you
Mhm.
could, get that will lead you through some sense of awareness. But there's also my firm belief that we actually have within us the knowledge that we need to know.
Mhm.
And it's just a matter of creating some space and time to be
Yes.
able to figure it out. And in fact, I am a big proponent of journaling,
Me
um,
too.
because I think that that is one really effective way that if you gave
Yeah.
yourself space to journal on a daily basis,
Yeah.
maybe first thing in the morning
Yeah.
for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, if you talked to yourself in a
Yeah.
journal every
Yeah.
day, free form, the wisdom that you needed would come out of you. Um,
Yes. Absolutely. And what
yeah.
are some of your favorite journal prompts?
Well, I the funny part is I don't even love journal prompts. I really love the stream of consciousness
Yeah.
version, because it's no pressure. You
Yeah.
don't have to think and answer a question, but I do know a lot of my clients do enjoy a good journal prompt. So I mix them up all the time, but I do like starting with the big questions, like what do I want to accomplish in my life,
Yeah.
or what brings me joy,
Yes.
what am I grateful for? The
Love
big
that.
questions. What do I want more of? What do I want less of? If
Yes.
if I could create a perfect next year of my life, what would it look like? You know, those type of things to really open your mind to possibility, because limiting beliefs are real, and we all are in our own box that was created when we were raised in the family we were raised in,
Mhm.
and with the people that were around us, and we get the privilege of blowing that box open whenever we want, to really kind of move beyond what we thought we knew that was truth,
Right.
into the reality that almost anything's possible, and we get to start to create our own reality.
So, what is the mindset shift here? Is it that to actually be happy, to actually achieve success without burning out, to actually ignite your passion, it all starts from a place of self awareness and self knowledge?
It definitely starts from that, and then can you construct a path that you can, essentially think of a blooming flower it's the season of spring, right? If you put your plants in the right location,
Hmm.
they're going to thrive. If they're a sun plant, they need some sun and they'll thrive. If you put that exact same plant in the shade garden, that
Right.
thing's not going to grow or thrive. So are you in the right spot for yourself? based on what you know about yourself.
Mm,
And if you don't know yourself, you can actually start testing things out, right? You can just try. Well, what if I did take a week off of
right,
work and didn't worry about calling in, checking my messages every day? What would happen?
right. What does self-awareness look like, or what does self-knowledge look like
For anybody?
for anyone? Because I remember when I didn't know myself, I didn't even think that I needed to know myself.
Yeah. Yep.
So, for those of my friends who might be in that state, how do you know what self-awareness is? Like, how would I know that I know myself better now?
Yeah. Well, if you I think when you don't know yourself well and you're not in the right place, both,
Mhm.
that's when your health and your mental health and your physical health will suffer.
Okay.
Or you also could find yourself over binge watching Netflix,
I
or
do that.
drinking too much
Yeah.
wine every night, or
Mhm.
eating a box of cookies or a gallon of ice cream,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People conduct they have numbing activities
Yeah.
when they're not really thriving, because it's the only way they can get a break is through these, drugs, alcohol,
Yes.
avoidance,
Yes.
um, food. So, are you doing any of those things, or are
Mm.
you depressed, or are you anxious all the time? All those are those warning flags that it might be time to take the step back
Mm.
and, it's like to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Right.
um,
Right.
and people can, it I think that the ways in which you can start the process of knowing yourself better are endless, even to the point of, I believe that if anyone goes to a bookstore, who goes to bookstores in person these days? Not too many people, but if you go to a bookstore or even start browsing on Amazon and you have like you think, "Oh, I want something so I can start to see if I'm happy or not," or,
Mm.
the right book will appear before you. It will like fall into your hands or pop on your screen, and you will find what you need for a resource to start thinking
Yeah.
differently. Yeah.
My starting point was doing my human design,
Ah, yes.
and it's just because someone told me to. I was like, "Oh, okay." And I loved their explanation of my human design, and
Mhm.
I should have done it sooner because it just makes so much sense.
And what are you? Are you a projector? No.
I am a generator,
Generator. Okay.
so it made so much more sense because I took that test, well, not the test, but I pulled my human design chart. It actually was not that long ago, but it explains so much better than I could on why I pivoted into solopreneurship, why I
Mhm,
left corporate, why I left big tech.
mhm,
And it's all because I get energy when I could generate energy for other people. But
mhm,
if you're in the manifester design, what do they call it, persona or archetype,
mhm.
then you get energy when you manifest new things, when you create new things. But when I was in tech, my job was to create new things.
Right.
And that just made so much sense that even though I was creating products for millions of users, yes, it's really cool. And I learned a lot and it was still a very good experience, but I just wasn't getting energized from it. Meanwhile, if I could just uplift energy for just one person, I was like, "Oh my god, so happy."
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right, right. Knowing yourself. And so, I mean, there's so many places. There's an Enneagram test people can take. There's,
Mhm.
even though the Myers-Briggs isn't really used in psychology, it's fine for self-assessment purposes.
Yeah.
Are you an introvert or extrovert, and et cetera, and et cetera. So I think there's a lot of even projective tools. I know people have tarot card readings, and
Mhm.
whether you believe in magic or
Yeah.
if you just think of it projectively, when you see yourself reflected in a card, a part of
Yes.
yourself, that just helps you recognize, oh, I do have that part of myself, or oh no, that doesn't make so much sense. I don't think I see
I
that.
love it. I
Mhm.
love it. My next question is, what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to make progress toward their goals and feels like they're just losing energy and motivation?
Well, so that kind of comes back to maybe we should look at your goals, right?
Yeah.
Right? Are those goals still good goals for you in light of who you are and what you're doing at this stage of life? I remember when I was practicing law, um, I look around and I didn't have any role models of
Mm,
who I wanted to be in the next 10 years. They were mostly male. They were all, I was in litigation, so I was fighting with people all the time.
right.
So I could have kept struggling towards my goals, but I felt like I was beating my head against a wall because there's the patriarchy is real. The
Yeah.
old boy network where I live was real at that time, and so you just have to start to ask yourself, is it really me that's the problem, or
Mm,
is it my goal and my environment that maybe
mhm.
should shift?
Yeah.
Um, and the interesting thing is, it's really hard to get the perspective you need to shift a goal all alone
Mm,
because how do you get perspective on yourself? And that's why working with a coach like yourself, or someone like me is invaluable because we get to reflect and mirror back to people the
right.
reality of who they are so that they can see it better, right?
Mhm.
And so, if it may be that you don't have time for this full life reflection, right? So if you feel like you're losing energy and motivation for your goals, you can just start with the basics. Have you taken any time off, right? When's the
Mhm.
last time you took some time for yourself? When's the last time you did something fun? Do you have regular fun scheduled into your life? Do you have a day where you go do something that you consider fun? Now, I've started playing pickleball. For those people that know what pickleball is, it's ridiculous. Little game with a wiffle ball. And it just makes me smile every time I play.
Mhm.
So, if I was still practicing law, I would make sure I was playing pickleball 3 times a week, probably, because
Mm,
that's what I used to, go for runs at lunch. I used to play tennis at lunch. Because if you don't take the time away from your stressful job to do something
mm,
fun, at least some frequency of time, you're going to
right.
just get ground down. And if you have forgotten what is fun, that is a huge red flag that you are not doing something right. Yeah.
My coach asked me to write a list of things that was fun,
Hmm.
and I said, "Oh, that's easy. I like to watch Netflix for hours at a time.
Yeah.
I like to drink boba, and I like to eat out on Fridays."
There you
I was
go.
like, "That's so easy. 3 things." And she's
Mhm.
like, "That's it? Make it 30." I was like, "Whoa, I
Yeah.
can't." She's like, "That's the problem."
That's the problem. Yeah. So having some fun is super important, and the research shows that it's not only good for ourselves, but it also helps with those connections between humans that we need, and it's really healthy to have humans that you connect with outside of work,
Mhm,
also, right? I know when you're working really hard, long hours, an intense environment, you're mostly seeing people at work, but it really is important to have those connections outside of work and to nurture those relationships as well.
h
S
when you made the switch between, being attorney and then you decided to become a psychotherapist,
Mhm.
that's a big shift. How did you work up the courage to give yourself permission to do that? Because you are on this trajectory. You made partner, which is, this life goal that people have, and you must be surrounded by people who said things like, "Are you sure you wanna do that?
Oh, yeah.
But why?" And then you're probably thinking about, "Well, what are other people going to think of me?" Like, how did you work through all of those feelings?
Yeah. So the good news is I had taken quite a bit of time working with a coach to
Mm.
come up with my plan of what else I wanted to do before I quit. And in fact, I went back to my first semester of my master's program while I was still practicing law and a mom of 2 young kids.
Wow.
I got up very early to get my work done. um, but um, but because I had gone through the process, I felt very clear that
Mm,
I knew that what I was doing didn't match what I hoped to accomplish. When I went into the law, I wanted to
mhm,
help people. It
mm,
sounded very broad, and you know, and then I ended up working for big companies
mm.
and defending corporations,
Yeah,
and it really didn't have that aspect to it of helping people. In
yeah.
fact, it was kind of the opposite sometimes. So, when I came down to my core value of of me thinking that my purpose on this planet is to actually help lift up other people, and that we all have some degree of hard suffering in this life, and
Mm,
what can I do to help other people through this difficult process we call life? It gave me the backbone I needed to announce that I was really going to leave the law.
mm.
And frankly, I don't know about you, but telling my parents who were so proud of their
Oh, yeah.
Harvard graduated, lawyer daughter,
Yeah.
um, that was the hardest thing. And
Yeah.
to put that into context, I had actually come out as gay to them at some point in my life. That's a part of a different thread of a different story. It
Oh.
was much, much harder to tell them I wasn't practicing law
Oh,
anymore than
interesting.
that. It took me 2 glasses of wine, and I think they didn't speak to me for a month. But
Wow.
it's not to say that things are easy, and I never regretted it a day.
Mhm.
And I really do feel like I'm thriving much more, using all my skills much
Yeah.
more in this path I've created for myself. But it is, you're going uphill. It's like the salmon swimming up the river to try to get sometimes to what your true north is. And you do have to disappoint some people, and you do have to surprise and shock a couple people. But in the end, as long as you are feeling solid in yourself, and
Yeah.
you know what you want to accomplish, and you're living that, um, it gives you enough courage to do it.
I love what you said just now. You you're doing this for yourself,
Hmm.
and that's your core. That's how you ground yourself. So it goes full circle. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. What do you actually want? How self-aware are you? Your self-knowledge. If you focus on that, then the external, like people can say all kinds of things, right? But all of that becomes secondary.
Exactly, exactly. And I think, at some point you go through enough life experiences, you realize that, um, people's opinions come and people's opinions
Mhm.
go, but the people you that matter, like yourself, your own opinion of yourself
Yeah.
is very important. And your close friends and family, they'll love you no matter whether your label is lawyer, or label is counselor, or label is corporate, or label is something else.
There's this sense of tribal mentality that is still very deeply rooted in all of us. And so when I was in big tech, the tribal mentality is, well, I want the recognition from this group of people
Mhm.
because I guess I gave them that right to recognize me, to see me, to hear me, and to go outside of that tribe where I was very comfortable in, that in itself feels like danger because who leaves
Mhm.
your tribe? Like we need our tribe to survive, right? That's the tribal mentality.
Yes.
And there's also this sense of, well, are they going to recognize me? What are
Mhm.
they going to think?
Right.
Maybe they'll just think that I'm not cut out to be in big tech because I'm just not good enough. But then at the end of the day, why do I give that power to them? Like, why them? Why
Mhm.
not me?
Right, not you, right. And I bet you could list now on, several pieces of paper how much better it is doing what you're doing
Yes.
now
Yes.
compared to what you were doing.
Yes.
Um, so, the nice thing is it becomes a self validating venture, because you get to take back control over
Absolutely.
how you construct things, and really make sure that you're hitting all the spots you want to hit to make your life feel good.
Yes, I love that. So, Kristen, tell us more about how we could work with you. I'm going to put your QR code here on the screen. Tell us about your programs. Tell us about your services.
Sure thing. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Well,
And
I
the
do
QR
have
code.
and if you hit the LinkedIn, it'll show you where my website is. But
Mm.
essentially, I help people make these mid-career transitions. Um, I primarily work with women, but not exclusively. It just seems to
Mhm.
be who's attracted to me. And I help people find out who they are at this point in their life, and to help them vision what's possible, where they can be. Then I have a 6-month program called my Next Spark Accelerator program that I work
Mm,
one on one with people, and I lead them through this process that I have that has 3 phases. It's, as we discussed, the first phase is know yourself, the
yeah.
second phase is and make your plan. Then you make your plan and we start implementing. And then I make sure
Oh.
you have all the tools you need in place so that you can keep the momentum going
Do you
when
help your clients implement the plan as well?
yeah, yeah, that's the middle part
Oh,
because
that's
I know that
huge.
yeah, that's why I have the 6 months because nobody can start to
Yeah.
implement before that. And so we really start to try to get into implementation right in the middle there because that's the scary part that,
Yes.
really making moves. So you want to have some support and have some mind tricks you can use while you trick yourself into doing
Oh
scary
my gosh.
things.
So true. And what's the third part?
And the third part is making sure you have just like the structure, internal structure on board so you can keep the growing process going and not, not get stuck again. You
I
know,
love that. Well, who is not a fit for this program?
who is not a fit? Well, if you're not motivated to know yourself, don't bother. Um, and if you haven't really already accomplished something, I don't work with younger people who are
Mm,
just kind of in their first phase of their career. It's really for people that have actually succeeded already at some level in their life,
mm,
and now they just know, well, okay, I did that. But these next hoops aren't for me. But
I
what are
see.
my hoops? Like, what hoops do I want to jump through?
What
But
is the difference between working with younger people and people in their mid-careers?
well, I think the young people are still finding out their skills and their
Mm,
strengths and
mm,
getting to know themselves in an experiential way. And
okay.
when you kind of hit, you know, I even say 35 to whatever,
Yeah.
um, you really have lived long enough that and you've done enough that you know
Mm,
what you're good at. Even if your brain doesn't, your body does. You have within you the wisdom of knowledge of what you've already done,
yeah.
and you can draw from that. And so that helps me. I love young people, but I'm not doing that because they can try anything, right?
Yeah.
But I love taking what's already kind of an established person and then helping them rearrange all the parts they know about themselves to
Yeah. I
redesign.
love that because in mid-career, it feels like so much is at stake,
Mhm.
and that if I pivot away from this path that I spent 10, 20 years building, it just it just doesn't seem like a smart thing to do, that's basically all the questions and struggles that I went through, and I was working with a client, um, she wanted to think about pivoting, but, just thinking about it,
Yeah.
but, she needed role models, she needed to know that other paths are also equally as successful or promising, if not more, and I said, "Look at Tony Robbins. He's look at where he started." And
Mhm.
then she said, "Right, it almost feels easier to start from nothing than to start from something because there's so much at stake."
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah, I think that makes sense. The sense of safety and wanting to
Mhm.
not lose
Yeah.
parts of things you've already accomplished. That all makes sense. And and the upside, if you can successfully pivot, is just this sense of joy and fulfillment that you're
Mhm.
not currently getting in whatever your current
Yeah.
place is. It can happen. It can happen also later in life too, where you've had an entire career and then you're starting to think of how do I slow down, right?
Mm,
I know
yes.
that's not your audience, but a lot of people I work with had amazing careers and they're envisioning, well, I've worked really hard and I actually don't want to work as hard, but what could that look like? How could I still be, somebody who's i- important
Yes.
and valued and relevant
Yes.
and still slow down? And how do we make that happen?
I love that. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for coming on to my live stream, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like igniting your spark and achieving success without burnout is something that I wish I could have learned even when I was in school, even though, as young people, we don't really think about that. But I feel like I would have survived adulthood a little bit easier if I have more of these tools in
Mhm.
my toolbox that I could utilize. So thank you for bringing more awareness to what is crucial here.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and for all the good work you're doing helping all your clients.
Thank you and hope to see you next time.
Yep, we'll see you. Take care.
Bye.